No date set for the next round of talks with Cuba, if there indeed will be another round. The Castro regime is pushing for additional concessions from the Obama administration during the first talks in decades. Cuba's top diplomat, in fact, telling the Associated Press, quote, "One can't think that in order to improve and normalize relations with the U.S., Cuba has to give up the principles it believes in." Whoa. Joining us now to help us better understand what's going on here, if that is indeed possible, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson, also former Energy Secretary, former Governor of New Mexico. Governor, Ambassador, it is great to see you here.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
I love the fact that immediately the Cuban government says we will not change a thing. This is who we are. Love us or leave us. Do you think that caught anybody surprised in the Obama White House?
Well, it didn't catch me by surprise. I've negotiated with the Cubans. I think the Obama administration expected this. Where the Cubans are really hard line, Lou, is, you know, I've been to Cuba several times. Whenever I met with dissidents, because you want to show your support for human rights and dissidents, they go crazy. They get very upset. And so while there's progress on a number of fronts, on exchanging ambassadors, on homeland security issues, drugs, environmental cooperation, political cooperation, when you say to the Cubans, all right, you've got to release those 53 that you said you would, you got to do it right away, you've got to find ways to open up the internet, the Cubans go crazy. And this is going to be one of the tough spots, but I think it's worth continuing. We don't want the Russians or Iran there. I think Cuba's going to open up. The Castro brothers are not going to be there forever. So I support the president's move, but it's not going to be easy to move, especially in the human rights area.
You know, I find myself scratching my head a bit. This is a president who is going it alone again. He's being the unilateralist he accused George W. Bush of being. At the same time, he will not even try to build a consensus or even a window into his thinking by articulating to the American people what the great advantage is to the United States by, quote unquote, normalizing relations with Cuba. We don't ask much of a president, but that seems to me to be the least we could expect.
Well, I think, Lou, this is why I believe it makes sense. One, it's been a thorn in our side. Latin American countries always beat us up on why don't we have a normal relationship with Cuba? We have it with China. That's number one. I think number two, I think there's some real economic opportunities for American firms. And then third, there's a lot of Cuban Americans in our country, in Florida, in New Jersey, all around, that want to have a stake in Cuba's future. They probably won't go back there, but they want to have an economic state. They've got a lot of family reunification, human rights issues.
Yeah, but as you know,
and they're Americans now. So I think, Luke, this is a part of the Caribbean that I think strategically is also important. You know, we've got Guantanamo
but what has changed?
there.
I mean, for 50 years we followed this policy. You can consider it wrong-headed. An example of American intransigence are simply a brilliant policy. I don't care. But the fact is we haven't heard from this president why change, why now, and what will be the benefit to this country. This thing amounts to the GDP of a small suburb of Los Angeles or Chicago, for crying out loud.
Well, I do think there's an opportunity for American tourism, American investment, the resort areas there. I think there's also a strategic reason. There's those ties with Cuban Americans, the human rights reasons.
For the most part, based on the polling that we've seen, Cuban Americans are not interested in a failure to free the island and see no quid pro quo, no reciprocity whatsoever in this deal, at least as articulated. I don't know what's been negotiated, but as articulated publicly by this administration. Do you?
Well, I think there's a split in the Cuban American community. The younger Cubans want to see a change in policy on the embargo. The older Cubans want the status quo. I think the point is going to be how this new relationship evolves. And I think it makes sense to open up the relationship with Cuba.
You know, I get kind of a kick out of the Cuban American thing, to be honest with you, and I've got the greatest respect for Cuban Americans. But it'd be like saying you want the Irish in Boston deciding what U.S. policy is with Ireland, for crying out loud. I mean, what sense does that make?
No, but Lou, there's a lot of other involvements that we've had with Cuba. You know, the Cold War, Kennedy, the missile crisis. It's a strategic area. We don't want Iran. We don't want Russia. We don't want Chinese investment in there. I mean, this is a beachhead. But this is the
administration, Ambassador, this is the administration that November, a year plus ago, decided to dispatch with the Monroe Doctrine. What are we to make of that?
Well, I think for many other reasons, a good foreign policy reason. Look, the 30-plus countries in Latin America always beat us up on why we don't open up with Cuba. Now they can't do that. They're praising us. I think it's going to help us in the region, a region that we neglect, that is very important economically, politically, strategically to us. So I think on those foreign policy grounds, Lou, it's worth it. But it's not going to be easy. This human rights issue, we got to push the Cubans. We got to not just freedom of the internet, you know, stop mistreating these dissidents, find ways to get that democracy moving there. And I think they're slowly, gradually, they're privatizing a little bit. Look, it's going to take some time.
You did say democracy there, didn't you?
Yeah. I said they're moving slowly. It's not a democracy.
I know,
but they're...
I understand the spirit of the thing. Governor, it's always good to talk with you. We thank you so much. Governor Bill Richardson. Ambassador Bill. He's got so many titles, I don't know which honorific to apply. Sometimes just Bill. Time for a look at our online poll results. We ask whether you believe that whatever the Obama administration is doing rises to the level of an actual foreign policy. 95% of you said no, it does not actually rise to that. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe most Americans are eager to simply see the clock run out on Barack Obama's presidency? Cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'd love to hear from you on this, as on every question.